Christ is risen.
Christ is risen indeed.
Alleluia. Please be seated. Celebrated poet Mary Oliver has among her many poems a few nicely short ones, like the one that she names a book after, 1,000 Mornings. It's one sentence, punctuated by 3 commas. But in my mind, she does enough in half of the sentence to beautifully name the move from Good Friday to Easter. All night, my heart makes its way however it can over the rough ground of uncertainties, but only until night meets and then is overwhelmed by morning. Half a sentence, that's what that was. That's a half a sentence. And we have the best news ever. All night, my heart, our hearts can make their way however we can over rough grounds of uncertainty. Breathe. For then comes the all-important word, but only until night meets and then is overwhelmed by morning. And this morning has overwhelmed us, hasn't it, with the beauty as you come in here into this place and get to sing these rich Easter hymns together with this wonderful support and leadership of the choir. A beautiful morning indeed. And can you imagine how that got up there? Some of you can. Check it out on our Facebook. It's on there. And it's worth it. It's worth it, for this is the most central feast day of the Christian year. Christians all over the world are gathered, singing and speaking to one another. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. And they're doing it in all kinds of languages. In Sweden, they're saying that. In South America, all over. In Africa, in the Holy Lands, in many places all over the world, they speak on this day. All night, my heart, our hearts make their ways however we can over the rough ground of whatever certainties we face. And there are uncertainties for sure. In Brussels, who knew that would happen? Uncertainties in our families, with health issues, with situations, in our churches, in our neighborhoods and relationships. And the political climate, how uncertain is that? By placing a comma after uncertainties, it's as if Mary Oliver says, don't rush past life's commas. Breathe with them. Take a breath with every comma you can. On Good Friday, we face life's uncertainties. We hope against hope that something or someone will turn the long night of violence, of fear, of injustice into a new and better day. Some of you may remember that world champion chess player Bobby Fischer. Remember him? Some of you remember him? Did you know what his favorite pastime was? You read about that? His favorite pastime was going into museums and hanging out in museums. And there's a true story, Snoops at least says it's true, that he was in a museum and was caught with great fascination by a painting called Checkmate. And he then spent at least 6 hours standing in front of this painting called Checkmate, studying it as a chess player. It was a chessboard with two players seemingly at the end of a tense competition. Well, one player in the painting is the devil, and he is ready to gleefully celebrate victory over the other player. But after 6 hours of studying this painting on the wall, Bobby, this famous chess player, finally realizes, no, this is named wrong. This is not checkmate. And he says, as if to the assumed loser on that painting, don't be afraid. There is one more move. Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary, the mother of James, and the other women came to the tomb on that first Easter morn. They carried spices that they had carefully and lovingly prepared. And they were relieved when they got to the tomb and the stone had been rolled away. At least something went right. But then their hearts turned to stone. Where is he? Why is his body not here? They had so longed to see him one more time. Then suddenly they're not alone. Two in dazzling clothes are so close that they could have touched them. But instead, these frightened women fall to the ground in terror. And these two aren't like angels usually are, courteous and asking or telling them, don't be afraid. These two question the women. Why are you looking for the living among the dead? Remember, he told you on the third day he would rise. But they hadn't remembered. In all the tragedy of these days, that word had slipped their minds, each of their minds. It was a communal kind of amnesia, a communal senior moment, if you will. Or there are other words for it, and they all had one at the same time. Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, Joanna, and all the women. Not one of them remembered that good news that Jesus had said. They were so absorbed in the bad news, the pain and the sorrow. They had forgotten that he had promised that there would be one more move. It had, understandably, slipped their grieving, frightened minds. How often is it that bad things rent the most space in our minds? Sometimes 9 good things can happen and 1 bad, but the 1 bad holds us in check. Communities of faith, Christian communities and other communities, all have good news to share. But what's shared often is our shortfalls, our shortcomings, that we're not the force in the world that we used to be, that we're communities of broken, forgiven sinners. And we are. But we are also, all of us, beloved of God, empowered to make a difference, a positive difference in the world. Christ is alive. though some would say it's just an idle tale, as they do in Luke's Easter story. Luke says that the apostles thought the women were just telling an idle tale. But I'm not convinced, because Peter, in the very next breath, takes off in a run down to the tomb. Well, people in first century Palestine didn't go out jogging. How many of you are joggers? Any joggers here? You know, we jog for fun or for exercise, right? Well, they didn't do that. But here takes off Peter, running at full tilt down to the tomb. What if the women are right? What if? What if there is one more move? Peter had blown it at the crucifixion, denying he even knew Jesus. He wasn't going to mess it up again. Maybe Peter's amnesia left him, and he remembered Jesus had told them. Maybe Peter's amnesia left him because of the witness of the women. And he remembered Jesus said he would rise on the third day. All night my heart makes its way, however it can, over rough ground, but only until night is overwhelmed by morning. This is Easter. Night met and overwhelmed by the lush and lovely light of the day. We come to Easter each year, indeed every Sunday, because every Sunday is a little Easter. We come to be reminded of this news because any of us can forget. It can be easy for any of us to forget if we try to hold on to hope just on our own with no community to help us remember the fullness of what Jesus says. My dear niece lost her beloved 25-year-old son a week ago. And she told me just in these days, she said, this is true for her. She said, she can't even now in these moments remember how to pray for her grief. So nothing comforts her more than knowing others are praying and believing for her. She's trusting the community's confidence on her behalf. She is believing because they believe, we believe, all who are praying and surrounding her, believing that there is one more move. We need the community's reminder, the community's love that comes on Holy Saturday and prepares a place for us like this to gather, to shout in joy or in great need, Christ is risen. Christ is risen indeed. When we think life's sorrows have us in checkmate, they don't. They absolutely don't, because God always has one more move. That's what Easter is. On the back of your bulletin, you have a very short little paragraph that you could take home. It could be a little thing to read over Easter brunch. But it begins with this question: what is Easter anyways? And it sums it up with its last sentence near the end. Worship is where heaven and earth meet. That's what worship is. David, that's why we are called to lead people in worship. This is what happens in worship. Worship is where heaven and earth meet in the people of God. Or as Mary Oliver says, where night is met and overwhelmed by morning. Even if your morning is a kind of other morning with a U in it. Worship, like this morning's good worship and every Sunday, helps communal amnesia turn into communal remembrance. That's what we're doing and why we need each other. God has accomplished the one more move. God has accomplished the one more move in raising Jesus, in whom we are baptized. Or if you haven't been baptized and want to be, just ask. We already have one baptism for the day of Pentecost, the 50th day of Easter. Because Christ is raised, we rise in the morning, on this morning, on 1,000 mornings, to make a difference in the world. Because we can, because we have been loved into that grace. We can rise to make a difference. Because thine is the glory, risen, conquering Son, endless the victory. Not thou o'er death hast won.